Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us once again for another edition of the Loeries Creative Hour, and welcome to all of our guests today as well. I think we still have you muted. I'm just going to mute all of you at this stage, so this will be easier. Welcome, everyone. Just to get into a little bit. So as everyone's seen, tickets are now on sale for Loeries Creative Week. We're so excited to be bringing you a very innovative, a very different Loeries Creative Week. As we all know, it's been a challenging year. The dynamics have been different, and we're finding an innovative way to bring the industry together to celebrate some of the amazing work that has come out of Africa and the Middle East as a region, and also to bring you some amazing thinkers who are going to share some great insights which will help us come out of this stronger than before. But other than that, one of the other ways we do it is by chatting to some amazing people from our industry. So today our guests are Peter Khoury, who's the Chief Creative Officer at TBWA HuntLascaris, and Ntombizamasala Hlophe, who's the Strategy Director at Yellowwood, and Karabo Denalane, who's the Chief Executive Officer at TBWA HuntLascaris. Thank you to all of you for joining us and for making the time to be on Loeries Creative Hour today.
Cool. Thank you, Preetesh.
Super.
That's just good. On mute. So I'll tell you the interesting thing is we're looking at this topic that says the dilemma. I'm sure everyone's really curious to find out more about it. As people join, I just want to say hello to a few of the people over here. Benoit Vincent, who's joining us, Gugun Dondo, Jasmine Pretorius, Lee Andrews, just a few of the people who are on this call. Thank you so much for being part of this and tuning in, and we should see more people join us as we go through all of this. Really appreciate all of you giving up your time. Maybe I should start with you on this because I know we had a brief chat about the dilemma, but maybe you can give us some background in terms of your thinking, in terms of what do you mean by the dilemma? Oops, sorry, it's the unmute.
We can get into it. I mean, like, there's a lot of tensions and there's a lot of stuff that's been thrown at us from a lot of different places that we all have to deal with. Not only this pandemic, but everything that comes along with it, and then everything in the world of marketing and media, and even beyond that. So, like, there's just many things to consider, and that is the dilemma, that there are many different dilemmas all happening at the same time across various touch points and in varying emotional ways. And yeah, it's interesting. And I think this talk for us will be, it's not about, us putting down so many solutions and that. It's more about a discussion. And we hope to open people's minds and just think a little bit more and think a little bit more openly about stuff, hopefully when we're done with this. Zama, Karabo, I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think for us, what the downtime has actually forced us to do was just to reset and not only think about our business, but think about ourselves, the role that we play in this industry, and also just like start like re-evaluating, what we are trying to build or the industry that we're trying to create. Because as Pete said, there are just so many things that are coming at us. And I don't actually think a lot of us spend the time to like really look at, the real deep issues that need to be faced so that we can actually create, this new industry that is required from us with new behavior, obviously.
That's amazing. And I think, Karabo, one of the things that I've been hearing quite a bit is, and I hear this in what you're saying as well, is a lot of the discussions about how do we build our company or how do we take care of our little ecosystem seem to have gone away. During the challenges that have happened, people are focusing on the entire industry. So it's no longer just about just one company or one organization or one agency group, but it really is about the entire larger industry and the larger ecosystem. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've noticed is COVID forced everyone to look in, and that's why bulk of the conversations are always around working from home, going digital, and so on and so forth. But what we've done is just looked at, what is the genesis of this industry? Where are we going? What we're doing now is basically going to set the tone for the next couple of years. And that's what has brought us to this dilemma. And we want to put actual issues that we all know, but like we don't necessarily have time to talk about them because we're always in a speed delivery mindset, you know, and just stopping and forcing us to like stop, think, you know, it's a big cycle that a cycle change that has happened with us, you know, because normally on an ordinary day we're just running from brief to brief to solving solution to solution. But I think the time has actually just helped us just like to just focus and just, you know, take a step back to say, okay, guys, what are we actually doing? What are we actually trying to build? You know, where are the next generation of us? What's the bench behind us? And that, and what are the expectations of that bench? And that, I think, is what has led us to a lot of the things that we'd like to chat to you guys about today.
Fantastic. And Zama, from your side, I mean, in terms of the dilemma that's been faced, and I know you live in complete strategy, and that kind of thinking is so useful in this time. What is your take on the challenges that you're facing right now?
I think my take is really quite simple. Every generation of an industry has to deal with the burden of what that industry has to face. And we just happen to be a generation that is stuck between a previous boom and a real unknown, right? No one's ever had the kind of capacity that a lot of the technology that's facing us is actually available. We're not talking about the Jetsons winning. We're not imagining flying cars. We actually know what we are able to do as humans and the stretch to which technology can take us. And so for me, I think the dilemma is about reassessing the things that we take for granted, reassessing a lot of what we consider to be important, and to be the generation of people who decide what we carry over and what we leave behind. And that's a big burden, right? The last people who were able to do this were probably the people who got the TV, because they had to decide what the society is going to see. And there hasn't been an invention that shapes minds as dramatically as what digital capability is able to do. And it's rocked all of our worlds, and rightfully so.
Yeah, there's a line that you said that really sticks with me and is giving me one of those light bulb moments as well. And you're right, I didn't think about this. We are a generation right now, because of this pandemic, we have to decide what we're taking forward and what we're leaving behind. We have to do that really, really quick, which, you're right, it hasn't been done in a long, long time. So there are a lot of challenges that we're experiencing. I see from your side you have some amazing content. Would you like to share some more insights that you haven't seen right now?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's just the tensions right now, you know, and it's the things pushing up against one another. And Zam, I don't know if you want to start on a little bit of this, or I can do it.
No, please start, Pete. I think I've also got a bit of echo, so I'm going to sort myself out with you.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, guys, if you just look at these, you know, these are just some of them, and there's a lot more, but there's the tensions that we have and the dilemma that we deal with, doing things for the now and the next. Or, you know, if some of you know what's going on with social media and all of that right now, it's the dilemma between addiction and expression. Or if you're looking at news, like what's fake and what's true. And even in some regards, a little bit deeper than that is what is subjective and what is objective, you know? If you look at the dilemma between skills and competence, or privacy and access, you know, people and brands, these are a few. And we'll stretch into a couple of them, and some of them are interchangeable, but I think as we go through it, we'll bring more and more up. But I think what we want to start on is probably just the now and the next. And Zam, I want to hand over to you to kick this off for us. Can you hear me, Zam?
I think we have lost Zama.
She's
Yeah, should be joining
yeah.
us.
I mean, whilst we wait for Zama, I think what this now and next, and it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier on. I think what now and next has forced us to do is basically, it says, don't only look at the current state, but look what is what you're building for the future, what's coming. So don't only solve for today, but also solve for tomorrow. you know, and that's a massive philosophical change and a mindset change that exists between everyone that we work with, or that everyone that works on our business. And I mean, even today, you know, like you have myself, Zama, and Pete, who are continuously challenging each other whenever we have solutions on the table to say, okay, like, you know, what is it solving for, you know? And because also we're living in a time that where, you know, there isn't so much resource going around. You know, we're no longer living in a time of abundance. So we basically have to like take full advantage of what we have, and to, you know, to continue building the next cycle.
That's a good point in terms of, you know, having to focus on what's coming next. And maybe Zama, since you've kind of spent, one of the things that I always think about, and then I've been having these conversations with a lot of people, is that we know that there's this need to focus on what's coming next, and to focus on the future and how we can move there as quickly as possible. But at the same time, we're dealing with all of this massive challenges brought on by COVID-19, trying to solve the challenges of right now before we can figure out the challenges and of the future and where we're going to go. How do we go down this process? What's your recommendation on this?
I feel like that's literally the decision.
Well, I'm hoping you have one, yeah.
Well, you know, I wanted to share a couple of perspectives before I answer your question, because I think one of the things for me is just thinking about how many of us have been asked in the past 10, 15 years to reposition a brand, right? A bunch of us can probably say, yes, we've received that. But what's really interesting is that our repositionings don't last. They're not lasting, not in the way that movies like, for example, James Bond, which is basically a 50-year-old story. Ian Fleming wrote that book once, and we've been retelling the same story for more than 50 years. And I think what we've got to start to think about is part of the secret of what they've gotten right is to keep a story, even though you may change the way that you tell the story. And I think this is where we really come unstuck. We keep focusing on how does the way we tell the story change the story itself, instead of really going, what is true, what is eternal, and how do we keep those things? And how do we see those things and make sure that that's actually what we keep in the now and in the next? And if you look at the kind of performance, for example, that James Bond films have gone through, the best performing films are actually the ones we are watching now. The highest grossing ones are Daniel Craig. And what's really interesting for me is that there's this period between like the 80s and the 2000s where, I mean, the franchise was a colossal mess. It wasn't actually making much money. It wasn't performing really well. But they didn't change the story. And I think this obsession with new that we have is exactly what kind of redirects us. And I think in many ways, in figuring out the now and the next, I think for some reason we always have the answer being new instead of necessary or relevant or identifiable or needed. We somehow always net out at new. And for me, I think that that's probably part of the ego exercise, where we have to check ourselves and go, does the story need changing? And if it doesn't, respect the story and find an interesting way of doing it. And so that would probably be my biggest piece of advice.
That's so true. You know, so I studied archaeology, so I'm going to give you some really old, boring stuff. But the Romans had a god called Janus. And Janus is the same god who gives the name to the month of January. And the reason they had Janus was because he had two heads, one head looking back into the past and one head looking into the forward. Yet he was a god of new beginnings. And I always think that some of the things that we've had a challenge with is we're so forward-facing that we forget the past and where we've come from. You agree with this? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this idea of, and again, I keep talking to everyone about this idea of being a generation of custodians, right? If we look at it, the number of new brands that have been created and been successful is a lot fewer in the past couple of years than perhaps what might have been in the past 50 to 100. And so what we have to be kind of humble about is a lot of us are actually recipients of other people's work. And part of what I try to think about is if any of us had to create a brand today, the amount of effort and energy we would put into crafting a universal insight, creating a lasting story. Now, fast forward and imagine yourself 50 years later, where someone basically just wakes up and decides, no, this is boring, I'm going to change the entire brand. What are you doing? Why are you touching it? It was perfect. And I think that's, for me, those are the tensions. That's the real dilemma of, if you're going to take something away from a brand or add something away from a brand, I think there should be a justification. Why? What proof do you have that we need this new thing? What proof do you have that this has to go away? And unless there is genuinely a tangible difference to what the brand will be as a consequence of what you're doing, maybe we shouldn't be changing it. And I know it's going to sound as if I'm kind of undoing the very reason why we exist, but I think we don't interrogate ourselves enough at that point before we kind of commit in a new direction.
So can we still innovate with this sort of mindset? Is innovation still have a place when we apply the thought that you've just shared?
Absolutely, right? Because innovation at its center has the same problem. The pivotal question is, what is needed? What's the problem that you're solving that now necessitates something new? And I'm going to throw forward to, like, later on, what we wanted to share is this idea of Europcar, Avis, and Uber, right? The innovation was not cars. We had cars. We knew how to drive them. We knew how to orient ourselves from one place to another. But what Uber did with that innovation is that they solved the problem of hiring cars, which is, why am I thinking about this? Why is there so much buildup to me getting into a car and going to where I need to go? And so the innovation need was always there. We just spent 40 odd years not seeing it until someone got up and said, well, why do I have to go there to fetch a car, drive it myself, when I can just hail one and then it's sorted? Now it looks like it's the most obvious thing in the world to hail a taxi and have it come to you. But that's exactly what innovation is. It concerns itself with the problem and then says, what's the best way to solve this problem? And Uber, it was never going to be a communication solve. It was always going to be something that fundamentally changes the way that we engage with transportation. And so for me, it doesn't negate innovation. It just means we have to be much more ruthless about why something needs to exist.
Great. Peter, is there anything you'd like to share on that?
No, I think the guys have unpacked that. I'll get into it in a little bit more as we go through stuff, Preetesh.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, please. Karen, what else? Yeah.
Karabo, you want to jump in here? Your microphone, Karabo.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when we first started Hunts when we first got together, I mean, in about 2016, you know, this was one of the slides where it caused a lot of debate in all our, you know, presentations and that kind of thing. And at the time, you know, when we put this slide up, I think what we're trying to say was that, you know, brands must stop competing against other brands in their category, but start looking at culture as a whole. And everyone's talking about that now. But what was quite interesting at the time was just the commitment to play in this space, you know, was very scary, was very daunting. Clients and ourselves, we didn't know what the roadmaps were in terms of delivering work in this space, you know. So it was a breath of fresh air, because for once we were actually, you know, going through and organically solving, you know, rather than starting off in this predetermined box of what success looks like. So Peter, if you want to go to the next slide. And that's what we did, you know, and campaigns like this, like Baby Bot, just to start off, we built and invested in a maker workshop, you know, and we went against all convention in terms of, you know, where the agency should be spending money, or how we're going to recoup
we weren't getting paid for this. Like, we just did it ahead of the curve because we couldn't wait, you know? Yeah.
So once again, you know, this was also like what we asked ourselves, what do you need to play in culture? And these are one of the things, you know, this maker workshop, these interesting individuals that aren't traditional advertising people. We opened ourselves and we called ourselves this radically open creative collective. And we looked at, you know, how we actually worked inside the agency to deliver these kind of things. So it stretched us completely. And if you look at the work, we believe that it sits so well in culture because it wasn't pushed, you know. And as consumers and as everyone who indulges in the various social platforms, you can see stuff that's not real and that's just being pushed down your throat versus stuff that just elegantly lives within the space and it's actually co-created with individuals, you know, in mind. And this is what led us to this kind of work. And I mean, it's been well received by the likes of the Loeries internationally. It's brought a lot of value and growth for the clients that we've worked on. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to pick a lane. And that's why when we say our competition is everything in culture, you can't be half in it or skirt around it. You know, you really, really have to go the entire duration. And at the end of the day, you know, things might work, things might not work, and that is what playing in culture actually means. You know, culture is not static, it's not finite, it's not finite. And I think that's one of the dilemmas that we have. It's like making sure that the people that we're working with or on the journey with understand that this thing is flexible, it will always change. And then we work damn hard to make sure that the intention and we stick true to what we're actually trying to do with the brand in that space.
How do you get the brands to go on this journey with you? Because I know sometimes I look at some brands and I look at a lot of advertising and I go, I cannot understand why they'd spend money on this when you can spend the same amount of money and get something amazing. How do you convince a brand to go on this journey, especially because it now forces them to go from a level of safety and a comfort zone into something totally new?
So if I can just start with that, Preetesh, like that's why we did this and we invested in it ahead of the curve. So we weren't getting paid for a lot of the stuff we were doing out of that department, but we were experimenting. We were doing it because we were doing it, not because we were theorizing about it. And you learn your lessons. So, you know, when you look at Breaking Ballet, for example, which is a campaign we did in 2015, that shaped a lot of like our focus in terms of where the power is and how it can play. And that particular project brought in a few projects for one of our clients, like on MTN, where they were more confident to do something because they had seen the success of what we had done on that platform. And then when you start messing around with the baby bot and technology, then you can convince clients like Standard Bank to do something like the tweet machine or Datsun to do the Twitter tug of war, and so your cases start to begin. But you got to start. No one's going to ask for the stuff that they don't know is there yet. They're going to ask for stuff that they've seen and they've referenced. It's up to you to play, like software companies where maybe it's 80% right. You launch it, you play with it, you tweak it. Even Breaking Ballet, for example, just to reference it again, it was actually called Bite Size Ballet for the first 3 episodes. And then we changed it for the 4th episode. And then we just retitled all of them and then re-uploaded them and went. And no one said anything. No one complained. Like, it was just us figuring it out. And as we got better, more and more people watched it and it was more powerful, you know? And then we had other lessons to learn or other ways to approach our other clients, different discussions and conversations about them because we were more knowledgeable about it, you know? And that's it. You don't always have to choose the big projects to start the stuff on. You can find the projects that are smaller on the side, that are not as precious, that your client's whole year doesn't depend on this thing working. And when you start to make those things work, then they want to start bringing it into the stuff where they actually have the money and ammunition to actually leverage it to a full scale, you know?
But what I love about this is truly about innovation and experimentation and investing behind those big ideas that you couldn't normally do on a normal brief. And when I look at it though, I know like there's a lot of agencies who are looking at the time we're in right now and going, this is great for maybe a few years ago, but we're now in a tough time. We're really in probably the toughest point we've had in many, many years, thanks to COVID-19. And maybe Karabo, you can answer this. How important is it to still keep this mindset of experimenting and investing behind these experimental ideas in the hope of bringing additional business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really, really important because like, if you really think about it, you know, to get cut through today, you need to spend quite a bit, you know, so I think, and we'll touch on this later, but what's the point of spending 2-3 million rand and not getting cut through? You know, shouldn't you rather focus that money, focus on this kind of work that will really gain you cut through in the smaller communities of consumers that you're trying to influence? You know, and those are the conversations that we need to start having. You know, let's stop focusing on the calendar and saying, you know, over the 6 months I need to drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects, and say, guys, actually, where is the point of most impact? And then we use technology to allow us to do that.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we looked at the investment behind some of these things, as Pete said, you know, they're a fraction of probably the average through the line campaigns that are going out every day.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can I
So,
just add on?
yeah, please, Amma.
Well, I think the interesting thing for me is when you ask the question of how do you get clients to do this and the kind of investment and experimentation, the really big link for me is actually about the dilemma of skills and competence, right? It's actually about thinking about the fact that by definition, agencies or creative agencies are supposed to have a competence to see what will be necessary, right? That's part of what is uniquely different about us as participants in this brand and marketing and society, is to see what's coming and to be the people who invest in what's coming so that when the world is ready for it, we are immediately prepared to produce it, right? And I guess for me, what we probably have to talk about is what the kind of tension of what competencies do people have versus what skill sets are we building in agencies, right? So when I look at it, the ability to convince a client is actually a skill that typically would have been allocated to account management, right? Is the people who massage the client, who convince them that this is the right thing to do. And then you've got the strategists who are supposed to somehow help the creatives figure out the idea. And then the creatives kind of come up with the idea and they sell it. But what's increasingly becoming very, very clear now is that every single person needs to have a strategic capability to just hold their own on why would we do this? Why are we going to do a breaking ballet mini-series as opposed to live performances in how it links to the task? Why are we going to try something new in technology? Why would we do that? And the ability to manage and influence is actually now something a creative needs to do, a strategist needs to do, and a account person needs to do. And I think for me, that's the real dilemma, is that we're actually now facing an age where those capabilities can't be separate anymore. We can't afford to pull them apart. Every single person in the organization needs to have the obsession with forward thinking, because we've learned the impact of diversity in the organizations. That we've got different people, you actually produce better work. It's not because Peter's smart enough to figure this out and so he creates a lab and then does this. It's different people going, what if we did this? Can I have a chance to do that? That produces this machine that when peaking campaigns, but it's actually 15 different thinkers trying to do the same thing. And so for me, I think that's a really big thing we've got to grapple with, is, are we liberating people to deal with the problems that clients are facing and to deal with the problems that we have in keeping us nimble and flexible in responding?
Fantastic. I have a quick question from Bridget Johnson, and you can choose who'd like to answer this. And Bridget asks, when you say cut through, how do you define that? And is that something you co-create or define together as a group? So I'm gonna, sorry, Karabo, if you just unmute.
Who wants to take it? Karabo.
Do you want to take that, Zama, or must I try hack it through? Hello?
No, sure. Let me try.
Okay.
Let me try. I think, firstly, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, so I do think that firstly it has to be co-created. I think what every single brief gets from clients, sorry? Okay. I think what's clear is that every single brief we get from clients is no longer simple. And so co-creation is non-negotiable now, because we have to come at something from so many different angles. You need people who have worked in a retail environment, who are going to tell you what the sales consideration of the decision is, but people know the brand, people know how to tell a story. And so every brief is being tackled by multiple people. And so the definition of cut, I think, has to be attention. It has to be, did someone see it, and did it get anyone to do anything? And I think that's the job of marketing and communication, is to wake someone up from their slump, and to get them to go, there's something happening with that brand, and then we pay attention to what else might happen. And so I think cut through has to be defined in that way, but it has to be created by multiple people.
Perfect. So, Zam, I think that moves me a little bit on my side.
Your connection's not great, Zam.
Yeah, your connection's not great.
But I'll also just jump in there a little bit, Preetesh. Like, to get cut through, like for me, so much of it, and it built off what Zam is saying. For me, you got to interrogate something, a product, whatever it is, a brand, until it confesses itself to you. Because then you know its truth. You know what the soul of that brand is. Then you know what category they're playing in. So you can find opportunities there to go against where the conventional behavior is. And it's taken on the conventional behavior, and it's taken on, like, not only in your category, but even in a broader sense. And like that gives you a disproportionate amount of attention when you can do that. For me, it's always, you can polish things as much as you want, but if that core story in its simplest form that you can explain to someone in one sentence is not provocative and it's not bold, and you can't express that idea literally just in a conversation in 1 second or 10 seconds, I can explain it to you. It's not good enough. You're never going to get to that level where it's a 9.5 out of 10. The best you'll get to is like a 7.5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my personal experience. But
Yeah.
Maybe talk us through. I think that's some amazing content to share in terms of skills and competence.
Yeah, so I mean, Zam, I don't know if you want to jump in here. You had a point to make on the dilemma and the tensions here.
Yeah, for me, this is one of the most critical dilemmas, right? Of anyone talking about brands and agencies and clients, is if we ask ourselves, are the marketers we respect today going to be decision makers of the future? And the short answer is no, right? Any CMO today is not going to be the person making that decision again in 10 years' time. And so when you're thinking about the agency of the future, you've got to ask, are we building the relationships with the people who are actually going to be the decision makers? Either do we have a good enough knowledge of young people that we can be the authority in a room with a client, or are we connecting with the right people from a client point of view? I think sometimes we've got this obsession with the most senior client and we're not necessarily considering what's going to move us forward. And if you just go forward, Pete, the thing for me is what we've got to try and remember is that we're in the business of the skill, right? The real critical skill of building an agency is having people who can't do what you do believe that you are the best at it. And that's a really difficult thing, because it's this idea of balancing the art and the science of dealing with the unknown. And I'm not sure that we're building those skills and competencies today. And if you look at the list, this is the World Economic Forum's top 10 skills of the future from a job point of view, any industry you're in. If we were to critically assess ourselves on these 10 skills, how many of us are actually really good at these? And I'll pick on the obvious one. How great are we at emotional intelligence, right? How good are we at coordinating with others? Creative agencies are famously known for being difficult to work with, and they don't like to play nice with each other. And we're finding that these skills are the ones that we actually need to have. And I'm not sure that we're facing the discussion about where our agencies go with this kind of understanding. And I think that that's a really big part of the dilemma is, do we have the people in the industry who are set to deal with the world in which our businesses are going to be functioning? And for me, this is a really critical thing. And like I was saying, it's this balance of shaping the unknown. And it's a really, really difficult thing to do, because you have to master it, but you spend your entire career mastering something that you actually never know. And Pete will tell you, every brief is nothing like the brief you might have received a year before. And so how do you stay at the top of your game when you never know the next thing that's coming?
like what I want to do, and Preetesh, I know you've seen this stuff, but it's another dilemma that you feel between skills and competence, and when you can get the right people, and you can be experimental, and you can have the attitude of trying things and failing forward, you get better at it, and you get so. When lockdown happened, we had a lot of work to do for the Solidarity Fund, and we literally had to do it in lockdown, figure ways of producing things and getting it out. And we didn't have weeks to figure it out; we had days, because we literally went into lockdown. The Solidarity Fund started, and we had to get out there. We had to be in PR. We had to get a comm strat done. We had to get a whole CR, brand assets, everything, and all the lessons that we learned on that. This next project that I'm showing you here is something that we did for MTN, like we just did it for them last month. But all those lessons that we learned from the Solidarity Fund, so all the skills that we had, the competence that we learned from there as well, we also learned who's better at this and who's not better at this. And we also learned like how to focus things and how to get more efficient on the groups, like everyone did in some way. But what we were lucky to do is that we did it at scale for the Solidarity Fund, and then we did it at scale again for MTN. And we literally had 6 weeks from launch to delivering this. And it is this Wear It For Me campaign that they did. And when you look at the amount of activity that we actually did and we created in 6 weeks, it's extremely powerful. And it wasn't only for South Africa. This was for the entire continent. You know, so you're talking about many different people from many different expertise, all coming to one and working in this melting pot, trying to create something amazing. But it started with a central design system. And when you can think this way and you can go, okay, how am I going to take something and really make it simple that it doesn't matter what format or what version comes at me, I have an answer for it. Even if it's not the best answer, if they need it in 5 minutes, I can deliver it. But if they give me a day or two, I can obviously get better at it. But my answer is always yes, I can do it. Because you've created such a solid foundation. You know, I'm not going to go through the TV ad, but what it did do is it challenged people, because a lot of young people, young Africans, didn't care about wearing masks. But everyone has someone they love and someone that they want to protect. So we literally got their moms to actually ask their kids to actually wear the mask for them. And we approached a whole bunch of influencers from different markets, and we literally we got 76 influencers, their parents, to actually publicly ask them to wear a mask for them, to which they responded. And then everything went crazy from there. People just started jumping on the bandwagon. And also, you know, some of them went to our microsite where they actually uploaded a mask. And some of them just took pictures of themselves wearing it and just joined the calls. There was so much activity, you know, and this is just some of it from a social point of view, but like we had more than 15,000 masks that people went there, just made a digital mask of this microsite that we have, and uploaded it, you know, and used it and shared it and pushed that message out there. So you took something that I could have said 6 months ago, we never would have pulled this off to the scale and to the depth and to the simplicity, because being simple is hard. Like you look at this now and you go, it's very simple, it's very single-minded. You know, how many campaigns do you work on that are this big, that are this simple? It doesn't happen. It's so complicated, you know? And when you look at like the bottom stuff, when you look at the amount of stuff we had to do, and the amount of versions we had to do, like we pulled it all off. But in 1 month, we've had amazing results of that. And the PR has also been amazing on it. So I suppose the reason why I showed that, again, it's just to show that you learn as you go. It's iterative. When you're thinking about the now and the next, and you're dealing with that, you're not waiting for it to happen to you. And you're also thinking about the skills that you have, and you're also thinking about competence, and you're thinking about internally and externally, who can you deploy at what, and who's good at what, and how do you reconfigure things? All of this kind of stuff happens live, and you realize it, and you've got to learn it in the moment, and you've got to apply it to the next project that you're working on, or even the next brief inside that project, you know? Okay, let me stop because I'm rambling now.
No, I also want to make sure we don't, I know you've prepared a lot of amazing insights and I'd love to get everyone to go through it. So please give me some guidelines as well in terms of how many more slides you'd like to share, just to make sure we can get to all of it in time as well.
Whatever we get through is cool, Preetesh. I mean, we're just trying to like build points and say, this dilemma thing is interchangeable and it's everywhere. It's in the big things and the small things, and in pretty much all the decisions that you make. You sit in at the middle of two tensions, Zam, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about growth or money or Karabo.
Yes, this is my favorite one, because I think for me this goes to the heart of what we do, right? This idea of the conflict between long-term growth and short-term tactical targets, and I steal with pride on this one from Andy Rice, who really just explains marketing is the profitable fulfillment of unmet needs. Like, let's not mess around, guys. This is what we do. Our job is first and foremost to make money. Right? Brands exist to make money for its owners, and I think we create a tension that doesn't actually exist. And I think this is the one dilemma that is self-created. We actually need to absorb and swallow the sales part of the brand, and this idea that every single brand is always looking to make sales overnight, and they will build the brand over time. You cannot land an iconic long-term brand idea in one campaign. You won't do it. It can't be done, because people need that repetition. They need different metaphors. They need the affirmation of those metaphors. So every time we fight a sales brief, every time we fight a promotion brief, what we're doing is that we're actually making it difficult for ourselves to have the resources to do some of the work that we want to do. And I know Pete talks about our obsession with inspiring people, but what we really got to remember is that we are dealing with clients who are going to face declining categories. And I think for me, this is the lump in my throat, right? Because we've all got revenue targets, we're all trying to grow our respective businesses. But the truth is that if brands don't grow, there's nothing for the rest of us. We are living in the definition of trickle-down economy, right? If the businesses don't grow, there's no money for everything else that needs doing. And I really think that this is one of the dilemmas that has to create that anxiety for all of us. We have to be bothered with this. How do you find a more interesting way to sell things? Because we're in the growth business. This is what we do. Every single marketing effort should be about driving growth and making money. So I always I cringe when I hear us debating about how, oh, I can't believe the client is making us do this sales thing. All they care about is money. Yeah, that's the point. The entire thing, it's almost like you're in a parallel universe. Yeah. And I really think that this is a dilemma we've got to tackle.
Absolutely. And I think this is why businesses exist. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to understand that businesses are not charities. They exist in order to generate a revenue and deliver total shareholder return to their shareholders. And if they do it, the people that we have on the ground look great, and then they will spend more money on any of the activities that we want. They're not making money. If brands are not making money, there is no money to trickle down into good communication.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the best examples is the way that retail does it, right? So most retail brands take marketing as a percentage of turnover. So if you look at the likes of KFC, it's the royalties and whatnot that you pay towards marketing. And one of the best lessons you learn from that is that if the store doesn't make money, there is no money to market to build another store. And it's one of the binding things that I think really gives retail the edge, because everyone in that industry is clear about the fact that when the store makes money, everyone else makes money in the system. And maybe that might be one of the most revolutionary things we've got to think about. Is how do we get tied profit conversations with our clients? Because the more we're tied to the same objective, the more we'll all work to the same ambition.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish off there, I think, you know, as creators, we need to understand that we are creating value, you know, and it just goes back to Zama, what both you and Zama were saying, is that the net effect is to create growth, value, because we all know that every month we sit in front of our clients and they say, yeah, but why I'm paying you this retainer, what did you guys do? You know, and we all default to the timesheets and all those kind of things. But we are not actually saying, like, you know, what we're building now is going to get you to that point of growth. It's going to get you to that point of profitability. So a lot of behavioral change a lot of changes in behavior have to happen as we shift our people into this growth mindset. And then it just goes back to everything that we showed you in terms of the work. And, you know, how do you like make sure that there's efficiencies, there's a cut through again? You know, you're dropping these seeds of amazing content into individuals, and then they spread the brand's message instead of just like, you know, pumping money into ultimately trying to achieve the same thing. So that's a dilemma that we have to solve, because I think clients need to see us as value and growth creators.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to give you another example there. So like some companies, you know, all of them have their procurement departments, and a lot of them refer to agencies or what we do as non-working assets. Okay, and the working assets are their media and their PR. So let me just like, let me pull that out of the industry and let me apply it to a different industry. Let's look at beer. Okay, you're laughing at me, guys. Let's look at beer.
It's such a true point. I think we're laughing because we know how true this is. So yeah, please.
But if you look at beer, like, would you call the ingredients non-working assets? And would you call the logistics and the dispatch the working assets? I mean, it's ridiculous. What are you going to do? Have trucks driving around with empty bottles? Or you're going to have like TV ads where you fly a logo for 30 seconds? You know what I mean? It's like, it's not only us. It's also about how people outside perceive us. Or like when you deal with procurement in a lot of ways, I can tell you that most companies, their procurement department already knows what they want to get out of you before they begin. And all it is about the squeeze. And we had a dilemma right now, because like advertising and marketing is like football. Sometimes the club has the power, sometimes the players have the power, and sometimes the manager has the power. But it always changes. And I could say there was a time where media was more influential than anything. There was a time where agencies were completely dependent on, because brand strategy, everything was in there. But right now, it's procurement. And the thing about it is that people break things down that are in front of them to create new things. So it is not going to be there forever. It is a time, it's a moment in time that we're going through, but there will be someone that figures it out, and then everyone will just go boom, and then there's a new way of operating, you know, which goes beyond where we are right now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you an interesting insight, because I came from the brand world, and the irony is not lost on me that I'm at the Loeries. But I remember when I started off, year one of my job, I was told to be really tough on my agency, purely because all the agency wants to do is win awards. That's what I was told. I was told this. That was a briefing given to me by somebody in our marketing team who went, you have to be tough in the agency because all they want to do is win awards. And I think that's the challenge that we have right now, is there's a need to change this perception and mindset that the agency is about the awards. The awards are just a measure in terms of how impactful the creativity is, but really truly impactful creativity will deliver great returns for the brand. I think a lot of brands have lost sight, and I can honestly say this, coming from the world, lots of brands have lost sight on that. And they think if I go and I make my logo bigger, put the price and just put that out there, I'll be able to win on that. And that's why you have declining margins for the brands and declining margins for them to spend. If they spend on creativity, you're going to find that they'll do much better business in the long run.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, one of the things that I think is interesting here is this, for me, is a call for the industry to lead, right? So it baffles me that we know that we get lambasted for not being able to prove our value. Have we figured out a way to measure our value? No, we haven't. No one's come up with a way to measure the impact of what our communication is. We all critique Millward Brown and we go, no, that's not the way to measure an ad. Surely there's another way. And so why are we not investing in the thing that would protect us from anything that could threaten our industry? So I do think that sometimes we kind of sit back and we blame everyone else, like the client, the media, the Times, the whatnot, and then we do nothing, right? We're not where the innovation for our industry comes from. We are notoriously an industry that uses other people's innovations really well, and we're sublime at it, right? If you look at what creative agencies have done with social media alone, that is phenomenal. but we didn't invent social media. And for me, that's a problem. And I really think that we've got to start asking ourselves is, where should these solutions come from? They should be coming from us because we have the capability, right? We've got enough of a mix of people who are, I mean, you have everything from engineers to the most creative people, to strategists, to client people. We have everyone we need. And yet we keep waiting to receive an innovation and respond to trends instead of generating and creating them. And then we soapbox about how we should be doing that instead.
Yeah, but that's true because also, like, all this energy is only spent on marketing, if I can say that.
Yeah.
You know, like for me, it's like it should be marketing and.
Yeah.
You know, every week we hear about the economic pressures that our country is under.
Yeah.
But how many of us creators are actually sitting around and trying to solve that problem? And for me, that is the next.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we start framing ourselves to be holistic problem solvers instead of just building brands? Because if you really think about it, every agency is chasing the same brand.
Yeah.
You know,
and we're all just there to receive the pot in our generation.
Exactly.
Well, if I'm hearing this correctly, what you're saying is we should move away from just purely being amplifiers of innovation and technology to becoming the actual product builders. We should have a product mindset and create the products that go to market right now. And that's a good insight. That's how you can lock in and create really great, strong relationships with brands. Because if you own the product and the access that that product gives the brand to a wider market, they have nowhere else to go and then stay with you.
Exactly. And I think we have no excuse, right? Because part of what is so great about technology is that it doesn't limit anyone, right? What you really are limited by is once you have a really great idea, is finding someone to fund it. And we're pretty good at getting money out of people. So actually what's true is that we don't actually have the ideas. It's not the absence of ability of getting money. It's the absence of the ideas. And I think we've got to be honest about that. Similarly, brands have to be honest about the fact that, guys, brands are boring. Like, when last were you truly moved by a brand? Truly, genuinely moved by a brand? How many of us take our steer from any call that a brand has, any tagline? And as nice as some of the advertising is, we don't actually really respond to it anymore. And that's our own fault, because we actually don't speak to the truth of what human existence is. And I think that, for me, that's the dilemma, is that if there's anything that I think I can reflect on the advertising agency, is that when you hear the stories of yesteryear, the power and the success came from people being honest enough with themselves that they were able to then see human truth in other people. And we don't do that enough anymore. We really don't. And I think that's one of the things that we have to rub up against and face our own demons.
Otherwise, people like him are going to beat us at our own game, because he's beating us at it right now.
Yes.
And so is him. They are both. They are both, you know?
Yeah, that's very true. And can you imagine being outperformed by Will Smith? I mean, his marriage is in tatters.
But here's another point, and this is off an article that someone wrote recently, and for me, it's quite powerful. The ad on the left is the ad that we've all seen, that ad that we love, you know, from Nike, very inspiring. The ad on the right is something that they did for Drake 2 weeks later. Okay, now if you look up in the top left and right hand corners, you'll see that the Drake, it was launched 2 weeks later. It's got 120 million views. The ad "You Can't Stop Us" that we all love has 60 million views. Look at the comments. The comments are 120,000 on the right, but only 9,000 on the left. 89,000 likes, 21 dislikes. And if you look over here, 2.2 million likes, 64,000 dislikes. What it's saying to you is that, like, sometimes in this world, like, we over dramatize and we think everything needs to be inspiring. And as marketers, we also get sucked up with our own bullshit, to be honest. You know, like, you look at this on the right, it's way more engaging. People care about it way more. It's not inspirational at all. You know, they illustrate the gulf between marketers and the general population. So while there's a place for topical, inspirational marketing that deals with societal issues, the marketing profession tends to hugely overemphasize like its importance. So ordinary people don't usually want or need brands to inspire them. Indeed, the desire to inspire and say important things might be far more to do with the egos of marketers, possibly, and agency folk than it is to do with what consumers actually want. And it's just, it makes a good point there, you know. And that's another dilemma that we're facing with right now is you got to look at what people want and what they're doing. And like Karabo was saying earlier, it's understanding the culture of people, not projecting what we think the culture is. It's actually really being part of that culture in itself. So when you do make a step, it's perfect and it's on point, you know.
Yeah.
We have reached the time, but I'm happy to carry on for a few more minutes if that works for everyone.
We can do one more. I think let's do one more.
Let's do one more and have
Oh yeah. The sea of sameness. This is really interesting for me because I like this analogy, right? That brands are broccoli. Broccoli is man-made, and it's been specifically designed to taste and flavor to be palatable to people. And that's all we're doing. We're man-making stuff and then getting people to like it. But the really important thing for me also about this idea of the metaphor of broccoli is that there is no vegetable like broccoli. And that's the point of branding. The point is that there must not be a brand like it. It's about being different. It's about distinction. And I think sometimes we, in being caught up in a really powerful trend and in really powerful cultural movements, we end up just pasting everything the same. I think one of the most jarring things was around the world. I think it was the video that showed how around the world, everyone did exactly the same execution for Alone But Together. Multiple brands. It's not because the insight wasn't true. It's because brands don't do anything different from each other anymore. And I think that was really a provoking thought for me, is to remember that the point is to make broccoli and to make it lasting, because there will never be another one. And that's the real task, and it's supposed to be difficult. And like I was saying earlier, it's supposed to be difficult because it's the unknown. And part of what we've got to keep our eyes out for to help us do this is, and I used it earlier, as if we're living in a world of Avis and Europcar, you've got to look out for Uber. You've got to keep your wits about you. There were decades spent with agencies building their reputations off of this fight between Europcar and Avis. You cannot tell me that those agencies today are making as much money off of those two brands as they were in the previous 10 years. And that's the tragedy, is that we were blindsided by something that was right in front of us. By the very thing that we say we track, we were blindsided by culture, by technology, by innovation. And I think we've got to find a way to deal with this thing of what do we do with difference and what do we do with distinction in the context of what's new and coming, and it's really hard. It's not supposed to be easy. We're not supposed to go home and go, wow, that was a nice 8 to 4. We've opted into an industry that is much more difficult because we're dealing with the nebulous parts of human existence. But we've got to aim for this. We have to aim for more difference. And I think, Pete, you've got a wonderful analogy about the problem with originality today.
Yeah, I'll get to that. But first, what I want to do on this one is it's just a quote, and it's something that Sadiso, who sits on the creative circle with me, said, and it goes to the point of distinction that Zama's making, is that we are unique. We are very different. We are not Western. We are not Eastern. We are South African. And the depth of stories and the depth of culture that we have here, if we can tap into that, it's stories that the rest of the world hasn't seen. And I'm not saying that we're selling stuff to the rest of the world, but in some instances with companies like MTN, we are, but in a lot of ways, to take from who we are and what we are, and we've been seeing it more and more especially in the most recent years, is like people are really getting to grips with the culture of who we are, and they're starting to express it, not in old ways, but in very sophisticated, youthful ways. Like I have people like Sanele and other guys that I've worked with that really put a different spin on it and really make it feel like it's culture that's part of the 21st century, but it also tips their hat off to the traditions that we come from, yeah. So
that's a great way, and to paraphrase as well, and I think what makes us unique as well as a region, and you can also think pan-regional as well. As Africa and the Middle East, we're a powerful region of people and with cultures that are very interlinked, that makes us quite unique versus lots of other places in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the last thing we have here, you know, and it's kind of just to round it all off, and it's just after everything we said and the dilemmas that we face in, like, you need bravery more than anything, you know. Like, all of us know what it takes to light up an idea, and that's hard enough. It's the art of what we do, the joy of it, the challenge of it, but it may not be enough anymore. Maybe if an idea feels comfortable, it's not that good of an idea. Our challenge is, as good as an idea may be, it should immediately raise the challenge of, is there still a braver way to go? You know, these are the moments that where creativity becomes everything. It's the times where we should all ask ourselves, what can I do that's never been done before? How can we provoke the question, you can't do that, can you? You know, and confidently, every time that question's asked, like, we want to say that, yes, you can. Because if you're habitual about it and you're doing it because you're doing it, well, you can't talk yourself out of something that you've behaved yourself into. So that's kind of what we have for you today, Preetesh.
Oh, brilliant.
Just on time.
We made it. I love this. I didn't want to see it, and I think there was such amazing insights. So thank you to all of you for that. Really appreciate it. In fact, and apologies to everyone whose question we didn't get through, but I'm going to put in Robert's quote, which is, this is one of my favorite creative hours, awesome and thought-provoking. It has been awesome and thought-provoking. Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate the insights. I think one of the key things that I take away is out there and the challenges are out there. But the reality is what we've got to be doing is facing it, thinking differently, thinking innovatively, and rising to the challenge. The challenges will keep coming and we need to keep facing it. So appreciate all those thought-provoking insights that you shared today.
Super.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. And to everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. That was Peter Khoury, Chief Creative Officer at TBWA HuntLascaris, Ntombizamasala, Hlophe, Strategy Director at Yellowwood, and Karabo Denalane, who's the Chief Executive Officer at TBWA HuntLascaris. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and have an amazing weekend.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.